Hey yo, what's good though? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So, I've heard some chit chatter around the internet again, and I wanted to kind of bend your guys' ear about this one because I've been very curious about this topic myself. Throughout the last couple of years, we have seen an abundance of some of our favorite franchises go through massive changes with the style of their games. A good example of this would be Breath of the Wild back in 2017. It went from this linear, very straightforward, kind of somewhat open-zoney style of game to a complete open world where you choose where you want to go at what point in time you want to go to it. Now, while there is a lot of people that obviously enjoyed this era of Zelda with Breath of the Wild all the way up until Tears of the Kingdom, not everybody agreed with this design change. Recently, there was an interview with the series director that was floating around, and what he said was kind of interesting to me. Essentially, the interviewers basically asked him if he would ever consider going back to a more linear structure for the series. Essentially, he replied with, "Why in the world would we ever want to do that? Open world is the most freedom that you can ever have in a video game. Why would we want to go back to something as limiting as a linear structure?" Now, I don't know about you guys, but me personally, I feel like there is a real importance to linearity in game design sometimes. Having an open world is always really neat. Absolutely, it's always going to be so much fun to explore an entire world at the tips of your fingers. That's always awesome. I'm never doubting that. However, there are obviously some aspects of game design that do end up taking a step back, whether they wanted to or not, when making things super open-ended. I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to death, to hell and back. They are my favorite Zelda games by and far, no contest. However though, I can see why there are people that believe that taking a step back from open world and moving to a more linear structure with the games is more preferable for that series. Now, that's definitely a topic for another day, or maybe a second channel, wink wink. But the reason that I bring this to you today is because obviously this topic has reached Pokemon. Well, maybe not the entire sphere of Pokemon, mainly in my little sphere, because this actually all stems from a comment I got on a video recently. I don't remember who said it, but I'll see if I can find the comment and I'll put it up when I can find it. But essentially they were asking if Pokemon should be taking a step back from open world and go back to a more linear structure like we had in the past. And I've thought about it a lot, like, we just got open world for the first time, truly, with Pokemon. Is it really already time to consider taking an entire step back with the entire franchise and going back to a basic linear structure like we had before? Here's the thing though, right? After the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, a lot of people were definitely left a tad sore, for lack of a better term. It was an extremely ambitious step for the franchise that we were not expecting to see as soon as we did, especially not right after Pokemon Legends Arceus, which was already enormous in terms of ambition. For me personally, there was a lot of looking past a lot of things here and there to really understand that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet did truly have something special to it for what it was. But there were a lot of things that did feel they were a little held back, so to speak. But do I agree with the ideal that Pokemon should take a step back from open world? I don't know. We'll have to talk a little bit more and I'll come to that conclusion in a little bit. For now, let's look at reasons why the series could potentially take a step back because of things that worked better beforehand. For starters, why don't we go ahead and take a look at roots. It doesn't really feel like we have roots anymore, right? Which isn't even technically the case because we do, they just aren't as obvious and we don't spend nearly as much time in them as we did beforehand because we move so fast in Scarlet and Violet. But that's kind of just it though, because it feels like roots have gotten less and less detailed over the years. And now we're at the point where it kind of feels like there's nothing really all that significant to get us to explore these roots. I mean, yeah, sure, it's nice that there's Pokemon around every corner to really look forward to, even in the most unsuspecting places. That's cool and all, but at the same time, we're only exploring for the sake of the Pokemon. We're not even exploring for the sake of exploring and actually looking into these places, you know what I mean? There was a point in time in the more linear games when routes would have their own unique themes to them, and I really miss that. The reason that I remember Route 225 from 4th Gen so well is because of its theme. The little guitars, the synth waves, the energy of that theme reminded me of where I was at that point in time in the game, and therefore I have a vivid memory of that specific route. I've said this a couple of times now, but I really do like the music in Scarlet and Violet, absolutely no doubt about that. However, there's a lot of times where things just feel like they kind of blend together, you know what I mean? A lot of quote-unquote routes and caves this time around don't really have that kind of individuality anymore, and therefore they're just kind of part of the overworld. Weirdly enough, to an extent, I get why this happened. Like I said just a little bit ago, we move very fast in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. We are traversing that overworld like nobody's business. Once we're able to get going, we get going. And obviously, a lot of us did that exact same thing because the developers expected that very thing to happen. They knew good and well that introducing an open world game to us where we could go wherever we want, whenever we wanted, was going to be the catalyst of us wanting to move quickly. And so, with that in mind, and their very limited time already, they decided not to put nearly as much effort into routes and caves and individuality like that. Because, what would be the point? You can argue with me on that one all you want, but the long and short of it is, because of how they were designed, inherently, we would have missed a lot of the detail and stuff like that. Hell, I've played through Scarlet and Violet twice, and I'm an explorer, and even I can admit that I've most likely missed a lot of detail in a lot of different places because I wasn't still enough to bother exploring them. So in a way, I can definitely kind of see why taking a linear approach with routes would be more beneficial. In a similar vein, let's move the topic over to towns. If we're being real, we're kind of having a very similar conversation with this one. Because we're kind of just in and out of every town that we visit in Scarlet and Violet, I guess they just kind of figured, why add any detail to them when we're not going to be in there that long? So they were very minute with a lot of the details and even the naming and the themes when it came to each town, and just kind of figured, hey, whatever, who's gonna mind, right? And you see, the more I lean into this, the more I realize that towns probably got the worst hit when it comes to moving to an open world. There used to be a point in time where I could actually remember town names and themes. Now, I can't name you a single city or town in Scarlet and Violet. And while some of them apparently do have themes, I don't know what themes are associated with which. Although that last part is mostly my fault because my first playthrough I was very distracted because I was streaming, and my second playthrough I was watching One Piece, so I wasn't really listening to the audio as much as I probably could have. But long and short of it is, design-wise, none of them really stuck out to me anyway, so I figured there wasn't really a point for me to take my headphones off and really take in the scenery because there was no scenery to look at. On top of this, the shops and the NPCs in said towns have also taken a huge backseat, and I think that's one of the most unfortunate things about this. The only towns that have significant NPCs to me are the towns where you get the armor to evolve Armorog or Ceruledge, or the town where you go to fight the Ghost-type gym leader that has all of the competitive build stuff that you need. Other than that, I saw no real reason to bother talking to a majority of the NPCs in-game, since a lot of them you can't even really talk to anyway, and the other half are kind of just pointless. They don't really do much for you. But personally, if we're being real, I think the worst part about these towns, especially in an open world, is losing, like, the insides of buildings. Instead of actually entering a building where you get to, like, look inside and really take in the scenery and stuff like that, you go to a menu that looks exactly the same no matter what shop you go to, that has the exact same stuff in pretty much every store that you go to around the region. Sure, there's some towns with a couple of different clothing items here and there, but I recall us already talking in depth about the fact that the customization aspect is not that great anyway, so going to a different sunglasses store here and there isn't really going to make that much of a difference for you. 9 times out of 10, those shops are pretty much the exact same thing. Now, in a sense, I can see why that may sound hypocritical, because in previous games, we kind of had the exact same problem in which pretty much every town had the same 2 shops, you know what I mean? But there was always something so what's the word, cozy about being able to visit a new town or island or city and go into somebody's home and learn a little bit of history, maybe about the town itself, maybe about that specific individual, maybe about the gym leader, or maybe about the events that are happening on said area that you happen to be in. There was something that always felt worth exploring, and there was always some NPCs to tell you generally what was going on, and there was just something really fun about that. It was fun to learn about these towns and stuff like that. And we don't really have that the same way anymore. Or at least not with the open world games that we have now. So yet again, okay, I can see why we need to take a step back from open world and maybe consider linearity again. Now, we did mention this a little bit earlier, but let's delve deeper, specifically into caves, right? Because that's kind of what caves are all about. There was definitely a time in previous Pokemon games where caves felt so massive and so just easy to get lost in. They were vast, deep, and so easily explorable because of all the different staircases and holes and pretty much every wall that led to new rooms. I recall a time where I had to retrace my steps a couple of times going into caves because I didn't want to get lost. And of course, there was those times where you would go into a cave, not really find anything, and then once you beat the game, you're like, wait a minute, there was an area in there where something definitely should have been there. Let me go back one more time and see what's going on. And 9 times out of 10, you either found a crazy item or an insane legendary. And right now, we don't really have that. And that doesn't really just apply to Scarlet and Violet either. We didn't have it in the previous generation either. In the base game for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we got a couple of indents that maybe had a group of Pokemon just kind of wandering around in a little open rocky area, or maybe there was like one item and a little hole in the wall, but other than that, we don't really have caves at all. In the most recent DLC, we did get Chargestone Cavern, which is probably the closest we've ever gotten to a real cave, because that actually had me lost for a little bit. I got a little scared. I had no idea where to go or what to do once I got down there, and I liked that feeling. But that's the only time I got that feeling, and it was practically at the end of the game. So once again, we see yet another aspect in which linearity could potentially work a little bit better. Hey, maybe we could find another way to reintroduce Flash as a gimmick, and maybe we could have it so that we actually do walk into dark caves, and we could have a Pokemon following behind us or possibly in front of us to guide us through said cave. I'm just saying, there's definitely a lot of ways in which we could work bigger, deeper caves into these worlds. Now, my last topic here that I feel definitely has a spot in this conversation is the trainers. I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but definitely one of my biggest problems with the open world games is the fact that trainers are completely optional, and that should never have become a thing. Because they took a backseat this time around, they're no longer the mandatory strength checks that they used to be. And so in turn, they don't really feel all that important to the overall game. And that part, I gotta say, is definitely an unacceptable aspect. Having the linear aspect meant that we actually did have to fight trainers sometimes, and we actually had to prove our strength to make sure that we were up to speed with the game itself. Now, of course, this isn't the biggest thing ever, especially considering the fact that we have raids now to get everything that we need that a trainer just doesn't give us as far as rewards go. But at the same time, I think that they're still important, and I think that having that linear aspect to make them battle us, to make them come to us, was really important. Now, I've rambled on for a good 10 minutes now about linearity having some importance in the series. So, do I believe that we should take a step back from open world? No, I don't think so. I am so sorry, because I'm about to sound like a broken record, especially for those of you who have been following me for some time now, but I have to say it once again. It really just boils down to time. This is their first truly open world attempt for a Pokemon game. Of course, there's going to be a lot of hiccups, especially when they don't have the time to work out the kinks that would usually work in a linear format. The main idea of an open world game is the fact that there's not a lot of loading screens, and of course they wanted to prove that they can do that. However, that means that it was hard to implement things like caves, for example. I'm 100% certain that their higher-ups were like, hey, yo, wait a minute, we can't really work caves in like that if they're gonna have loading times. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid here. We want a truly open-world Pokemon game. We can't have that if caves aren't open. That's definitely not at all how that conversation went, and I'm not sure how to put into words how that conversation even could have gone, because I wasn't there, and my uncle does not work at Nintendo or Game Freak, but you get what I'm getting at. Game Freak had to take what they knew and implement that into a brand new game in an entirely different way, and they didn't really have the time to figure out exactly how all of these things could work in tandem. And hey, you know what? That's kinda gonna end up happening because we kinda figured that going into these games, there were gonna be a couple of hiccups here and there. However though, going forward, I still fully believe that we can have detailed towns and a more fun and unique take on trainers and how to approach them and stuff like that, if they actually have the time to design these things. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if something is completely open world when there are just some things that work better with a little bit of linearity, and I think that we could have a very good blend of both if they had the time to implement those things. There are just simply a lot of things within the realm of Pokemon that seem to work better in a linear style because we're so used to them that way. However, I think that they could, if they have the time, change things up enough to make them work in an open world. Like I said earlier, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the most ambitious step they've ever taken with this series, and I don't think it's the fact that we need to take a step back, it's the fact that they need time to know how to take the next step forward. With a little bit of time, the proper guidance, love, and care, and a little bit of inspiration from previous generations, we could see a true turnaround for a lot of these aspects that could work in a way that makes everybody a little bit happier. And you know, frankly, Pokemon inherently has always been kind of open world, so in a way, I don't think it would even be possible to take a step back at this point. There's only forward. All we can hope is that they just do forward a little bit better, if that makes any sense, but hey, that's just me. So that'll just about do it for this one. I know that this isn't like a brand new topic, and in fact, I think it's been something that's been circling around for the last like 2 years since Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have dropped, but at the same time, it's something I wanted to talk about anyway, because I saw that comment a couple weeks ago or a couple days ago. I don't remember when I saw it, but when I did see it, it really got me thinking, and I really wanted to throw in my 2 cents on this topic, you know what I mean? But of course, you don't have to agree with me, which is why you already got the mic, so you have got to tell me what you are thinking. Do you believe that we should go back to a linear style of Pokemon? Do you believe that we could possibly, going forward, make an open world Pokemon concept work? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always, always, always down there with you guys. And with that, it is time for me to skedaddle, because it is the holidays and I've got a lot of videos to make before the end of this year and for the beginning of next year, so I gotta get a move on. But with that, I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I am Gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time.